So this makes most sense to me. I know that. Well, welcome to Noon Live as we kind of begin, and I know that you deny you're a spy. I know that
I do.
You've remained clear that you're not a spy. But I also noticed that I didn't have to tell you what that song was, which may be another thing that would make you a spy.
I know what that song is, but I won't admit to anything, especially on camera.
It's very nice. But anyway, welcome everybody to Noon Live with our friend Steve Williams today with our kind of today we may even get into some worldwide news roundup and some things like that. But let's begin as we do each weekday with a short prayer and just kind of connecting each other church-wide and community-wide and get ourselves kind of set for the week. So would you pray with me? Eternal God, creator of the universe, creator of us, we would ask that as we continue now to begin to take steps toward a new reality, not halting or sheltered in, even in our imaginations, but beginning to carefully and thoughtfully walk into a new way of being, I would ask that you would help us to continue to be safe and thoughtful and wise, to not rush or feel like we have to learn, to separate ourselves from those things that might distract us, and to become ever more your people. Father, we know that this hasn't surprised you. We know that you have continued to reign. We would ask now that wherever we find ourselves, we would feel the gathering of our church hearts in prayer, and that we would also be able to rest back into your love. Help us to take a deep breath in those spaces, to know what it means to be your people. We ask all this in Jesus' holy and precious name. Amen.
Amen.
So, good afternoon.
Howdy.
It's good to see you. Always enjoy the time we get to spend. I also like that we have our arm length experience where we have to be at least two plus arm lengths away from each other in order to be safe. Used to be one arm, now it's two. So it's good to be together. What I thought I really wanted to, as we continue to kind of do our news roundup and think about how do we see through all of the strangenesses of the news, I thought we'd start really right there. Vice President Pence is self-isolating. There's multiple cases of COVID-19 in the White House. The president apparently gets tested pretty regularly. These are things that I just picked up in the news over the weekend. And yet at the same time, there's a real push to open up the country. It feels like even in the smallest rooms, there's got to be a pretty serious threat. And yet there's this real energy to try to get us to open back up. I see in South Korea, I see in some other parts of the world that in opening back up, they've had some spikes that have happened and they've had to, kind of ebb and flow a little bit. So we're kind of not necessarily behind in a negative way, like we weren't out there in front, but like we're next in the timeline of understanding how this goes. How do we begin to see and it seems to me that the CDC was front. They were the people that we were listening to, and then now they're not the people that we're listening to. And so it just feels a little bit confusing. It feels like the center is not consolidated, not somehow meshing very well right now. So is that your sense? Like you've been in all of these backgrounds. For those of you who don't know, maybe tune in for the very first time. Steve worked for the Secretariat Office. I always say the wrong name. It's a very fancy name. I can't remember it.
Executive Secretariat of the Department of State.
The Executive Secretariat of the Department of State, which really means that you worked in for the Secretary of State and the offices that came with that, right?
The seventh floor.
Seventh floor. So, wow.
That's why we call it.
Yeah, for almost 30 years, been in all these small rooms from all these different administrations. And so the reason that I love to talk to Steve about this is that I feel like he has an insight on what's going on behind the scenes a little bit, and hopefully can help us navigate what we see in front. So talking about that and the situation that we saw kind of happen over the last week, what do you see in that and how do we begin to navigate?
Confusion, a lack of demonstrative leadership, the responsibility for executing the non-plan is now at the governor and the local level. And of course, there being 50 states and several territories, the governors are doing it differently.
So what's good about that?
Nothing.
Well, as a states-oriented person, as a Texan primarily, I think that's fantastic. Again, but the borders that we would have probably wouldn't be on the south side. So.
And how many states does Texas border?
More than we like.
I think it's quite a few.
Yeah.
And all those people can cross the borders without being checked, and we don't know what kind of monsters they're bringing in with them.
Right. So you make the good point, right? You can't just do it as governors. You have to have a single. Would that include Canada, though, as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, Canada has basically closed its borders to us.
So Mexico also, I thought, was becoming more rigid.
Yes.
Which I don't remember in my lifetime.
Well, Mexicans are humans, and they don't want to get sick and die.
Seems like a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like us. So they don't want to take those risks because they don't have the medical infrastructure to deal with it. Now, the reason why we see these vocal minorities pop up is primarily economic. They want to work. I understand that, as I've said many times before. People got to feed their families. I get it. The problem is you are a minority. And those of us who are in one of those dangerous predicaments, age, for example, me, my wife, asthma, we can't afford to be infected by someone who's, for reasons of give me liberty or give me death or whatever it is, won't wear a mask in public.
Mm-hmm.
So I hate to bring religion into it, but we're a church, so I'm going to.
Don't hate it. Just let it flow. This is the place. It's a safe place, Steve.
This is not the Judeo-Christian ethic to love your neighbor as yourself. I'm your neighbor. I'm vulnerable. Don't you care?
Right.
And it disturbed me when they were talking to one young man who has a medical condition, who's got a note from his doctor that says he should not be required to wear a mask. And when they interviewed about him, he said, I don't really care what other people do.
So I think that'll make you crazy. And that's really where I got, because I don't like wearing the mask. It's hot. It's uncomfortable. I feel weird. I do like wearing a mask in a bank. I do like that because, it feels like this is the first time I've ever been allowed to wear the mask in a bank. And I've always kind of feel like where I come from and the generations before me, perhaps we wore masks. I don't know. But so one thing that I'm trying to figure out, though, is I think that's the deal is this isn't. Have we done ourselves a disservice being so driven by individualism that now we're getting bit because we don't have the same kind of muscle for communal life?
Maybe so. I mean, the days of the Wild West when rugged individualism and that pioneer spirit, forged a country out of the wilderness, those are gone.
Okay.
We are not much wilderness anymore. And if we don't change with the times, we may die in larger numbers than are necessary. Let me point out that during the 1917-18 flu epidemic, which state do you think really got hit very hard?
California.
Montana.
Of course. Why? Why Montana?
Because they're rural, they had no resources. There was no one there to warn them, no hospitals, no nothing. And when it came around the second time, which was worse than the first experience during the summer, they got whacked.
Wow.
So rural communities who feel somewhat immune to this first go around always have to keep in mind that they don't have the hospitals like New York City does.
Mm-hmm.
New York City was worried about, are we going to run out of hospital capacity? Okay, and they almost did. They had to bring in that ship. They had to put up some tents and so forth in the Javits Center. But if you're sitting out there in East Bug Tussle, Louisiana,
which is an actual place.
Is it really?
No.
Okay. Because I made that up. And they don't have any hospital facilities at all,
Right.
which means you got to drive to Baton Rouge just to get tested.
Right.
You're in trouble.
That's interesting to think about the rural vulnerability.
Yeah, well, it's all about the medical system's capacity to deal with the epidemic.
Yeah.
So you do two things. You have a medical system that has the capability, it can grow, it can surge in size and so forth. And two, you limit the number of people who have to take advantage of that medical system.
Yeah.
And that's where the distancing comes in, the testing comes in.
So what you're saying is, regardless, when the CDC says, I did look at the one that they decided not to use. The administrator tried not to use it. I did read most of it. It's actually quite helpful if you haven't had a chance to look at it.
I've heard it's pretty detailed.
It's very detailed, and it has like yellow lights and green lights, and if this, then that, and if this, then that.
Yeah.
But it was probably the first thing that I saw, whether I agreed with all of it or not. Which what does that matter? It was easy to read. I could understand what they were after and kind of put it together. So I understand that the economy, we don't know what to do when an economy shuts down, especially in our economic system. I get that. I don't know what happens either.
Well, we are a service-driven economy. We have people who buy services from other people. Here's the kicker. If there's no one alive to buy it, there's no economy.
Also true.
So we need to preserve the customer side of the equation as well as the service delivery side. You know, how you strike that balance, I have to leave that up to the experts who run the numbers and so forth, all of whom are now quarantined. So we have to look at the data and we have to follow what the science says. This is not one of those situations where I know better than them scientists, I'll do what I want to things.
Yeah. I'm assuming that that's a Southern accent and not a Texas accent.
I'm originally from Arkansas, so I can get real Southern. I had to homogenize that accent out when I went to work for the State Department because they made fun of me.
I bet they did. Made fun of me in England. Called me Forrest.
Forrest Gump.
That was right.
Yeah. Well, speaking slowly in England is fine, but speaking with that drawl just does not cut it.
I enjoyed it. I turned it up just to aggravate, but that's because that's my personality. Because I don't really have that big of an accent unless I start talking to my Amarillo family, and then all of a sudden I can talk like this real fast, but it's weird. What I'm concerned with though is, like, I do know that one of the things is that the other confusing parts of this is that the numbers that come out, they have changed them. There's been all this kind of craziness. It's less than 1% death rate. You know, they look at it and they're like, what in the world? Like, are we oversteering? And then on the other side, I talked to medical folks, and they're like, no, we're not oversteering. This is a very unique thing. It's different. We don't know how to handle it. You know, New York wasn't making up their panic. You know, that was a real thing. And so I think it's interesting because if you're out in the suburbs and you haven't really had a neighbor that got sick and died, then it's hard to feel that intensity. Well,
as George Bernard Shaw said, there are lies, there are damn lies, and there are statistics. You know, when they say the death rate is less than 1%, okay, 1% of 325 billion people, yes, it's less than that.
Yep.
Is the death rate less than 1% for the people who have actually been hospitalized or diagnosed with the disease? No. So you have to define your terms.
So like, who's been sick? Right. So that's why it's been a shifting number.
Yeah. So what you want to look at is how many people that we know have got the disease have proceeded on to death.
Yeah.
And here's the problem. We don't know that first part.
Right.
Because of lack of testing. We don't know how many people who have actually had the disease.
Yeah.
So some of this is just pure guesswork. What you can rely on are the statistics that Johns Hopkins and the University of Washington are pulling in from hospitals. Diagnosed cases versus death among those diagnosed cases.
Yeah. Or hospitals. I mean, if they're already hospitalized. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
Those
a
are
strange
hard.
time. So in any case, when you have your worldwide medical community
Mm,
at a high alert animated,
yes.
those people aren't worried about our economy. You know what I mean? Like I think sometimes we get it to where we get kind of myopic a little bit. We're only thinking about our nation. So is it helpful to think worldwide a little bit right now and look at the consistencies and the differences amongst people that are having this conversation in the world? Like how would you effectively do that?
Well, the best news comes out of Europe because first world countries. England's having a hard time. They've got the highest numbers in Europe now. The Italians have managed to plateau, and they're actually closing down ICU beds, because they're doing much better in places like where it first started, Bergamo, which is in the center part of the country. So Germany has plateaued. Their death rate dropped down to about 1, which is much better than the 4%, 4.2% we're experiencing here. Their infection rate, though, has crept up just a bit since they've started to open up their economy. The infection rate is basically if one person has it, how many people are they infecting?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in Germany for a while, it was one person, one infection. Now it's crept up to one person infected can infect 1.13 people. So like
Which
basically
means 1
one
to 13.
Yes.
Up to 13.
No, 1.13.
Oh, okay.
So
A little more.
it's about an eighth increase, 1/8 increase over what it was before. So
Yeah.
1 1/8, one person can infect like 1 1/8 people. Not that much, but it still happened since they tried to open up parts of their economy, just parts.
Yeah.
Now, one thing they have also identified is that the key to getting the economy going is not the businesses. It's the schools.
Really?
You get the kids back in school, the parents can go back to work.
So we're really looking at the summer as the summer.
Yeah.
Because we're out of school.
Yeah. They don't do that in Europe.
Right. So we'll actually, basically the world is the laboratory for us to watch if we'll pay attention.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So come fall, if the little ones and the not so little ones can go back to school, then the parents will be free to go to their jobs, circumstances permitting, of course.
Yeah. Fascinating time.
Yeah, it's interesting that, some countries have adapted fairly well. Sweden didn't do anything, and they still got relatively decent numbers, but people are still dying there.
Yeah.
They're greater rates than Germany, Denmark, Norway, those kind of guys.
What do you do with the like, let's just let this thing do its thing and we'll figure it out? I mean, there's this kind of feeling like these numbers are so low, we're going to be fine. If people and the truth is, I guess at some level, until we have a vaccine, either we shelter in place until the vaccine arrives, which they tell us could be a year. So that seems untenable. And or just go out and try to live your life. And if you get sick, you deal with it. Like these extremes are very interesting to me. But I know that people are in minorities in both extremes.
Well, the people who are worst affected are those service industry people working in restaurants, hair salons, that kind of stuff. I have no hair, so I don't worry about that.
Yeah, I'm my luxurious locks are calling for trim.
Yeah, and this too.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Unfortunately, in order to save larger numbers of people, those folks may have to suffer some. Yeah. My wife is a nurse. She's been through these epidemic kind of conditions before, and the only takeout she will bring home is a pizza, because she can take it out of the box, put it in the oven, and sterilize it again. Really?
Yeah.
So you're going to your local Wendy's, which can't get beef anymore.
Don't like Wendy's anyway, but I shouldn't say that out loud.
Yeah, well, we're not making money off this, so you can say that. It's dangerous. You don't know whether the people cooking it are infected. You don't know if they're observing proper procedures and so forth.
I'm sure they do their best, but you're right.
Yeah, the Texas Health Department, especially in Travis County, they're pretty strict about this stuff. But different countries have tried different things. Denmark is experimenting with holding school classes out of doors.
Which seems in Denmark like that would be a short-lived potential. Like at some point in Denmark, my imagination is the Lord of Winter arrives and destroys all things outside.
Yeah, in late September, early October.
Yeah. So that can't live for long.
No, but since they go to school during the summer, except for the month of August, they can do it because it's quite pleasant that time of year in Scandinavia.
That sounds nice. Let's just a little conversation. Historically, looking back on different things that have affected culture, 9/11 as an easy example, and then big ones like world wars, maybe even pandemics and plagues of the past. What kinds of things, a couple of things, do you think are going to change for good? What kinds of things do you think this is going to affect that we won't be back to what we used to have? Like literally, just like that, those things were over. Can you think of anything like that, or what? Put it into a little bit of a historical perspective, since I know that's something you love.
Well, the pandemics that have happened in historical terms really killed the Byzantine Empire. The Mongols brought something with them that wiped out most of the Islamic world. So these things do happen. The bubonic plague killed off a third of Europe's nobility. We've talked about this, which brought about some lightening of the autocracies that existed there. For us, I think one thing that will definitely come back are different kinds of travel restrictions. Loading people onto a 737 MAX jumbo, whatever that thing is, cheek by jowl, with less than 12 inches between your mouth and someone else's, probably ain't going to happen. I think the days of anyone wanting to ride in that middle seat are gone. I never wanted to anyway, so that's fine with me.
Nobody wanted me to. I'm like in every seat at that point.
It's so I think ticket prices will go up because you cannot fill these big planes anymore, which also makes me think that the planes are going to get smaller. There'll be going to be more smaller aircraft, Embraers, that sort of thing that are popular in the rest of the world, not quite so popular here. Secondly, I think you're going to see a resurrection of the old health passport.
What's that?
Well, when I first joined the Foreign Service, we had this international health document, a yellow folder that went along with our passport that showed our vaccination status. And I think that's going to come back. They're going to want proof that you've had the vaccine against this.
Yeah, I remember having to carry a yellow fever vaccine when I went into Guyana.
Yeah, I've had that too. So it probably won't be paper. It'll probably be something electronic. It may be placed into a database that's shared worldwide. If you're worried about the Germans or the Russians or something, knowing your health status, now's the time to start. But it's going to be necessary because they're not going to want you in their country if you're going to perhaps bring in a germ. So I think that's just going to be a fact of life.
That makes me think of, when you do come in, even right now, I guess it's the FDA or somebody has got a whole section of customs that if you have fruits, if you have been around livestock, because a lot of stuff that we do when we're in Israel, we hike, and so we go through all kinds of the not ranching in the desert, but you're out there. And so for years, we went over and they sprayed a lot of our stuff down. We had to pull out our shoes. We had to explain, that we'd been around shepherds and stuff like that, which is an important part of the biblical story. Not a lot of tourists do, but we had to do that. It makes me think, I wonder if there's also going to be some opening up of, okay, well, you don't have this check. Who are you? How do we move you over here to figure out exactly how deep a threat you are, or if there's a concern about your health? It's interesting to think about that.
And that was done to protect American livestock.
Dang, it was. And I will say, being from Texas, it was real easy to tell my groups, or Oregon, we had a good group from Oregon that was also ranchers. And I was like, hey, y'all know we got it. And they, yes, but not everybody that does that knows.
Yeah, when I was assigned to Mexico, we had the Mexican-American Mixed Commission on Screwworm Eradication.
Wow.
And basically what these guys did is they got the screwworm flies, which literally bore into the eyes of beef cattle. And
Yikes.
it was a terrible plague for a long time. They would take these fly larvae and irradiate them. So they grew up to be sterile and then release them in from airplanes all over the place. So they would mate and then there wouldn't be any baby flies.
Wow, that's kind of clever.
It worked.
But that's, I guess, what we're looking for is the sterile baby flies. Something like that.
So if we do it for cows, we have to do it for people.
If we were going to name this episode, if we do it for cows, we should do it for people.
That's right.
So yeah, I agree with you. I actually was wondering about church life. So behind me, you see, our empty church space, which is what it looks like almost all the time now. Outside of when we have worship and we bring the teams in and do all that kind of stuff, and even then we're all kind of doing a little dance. Church is becoming smaller. I mean, one of the things we're moving right through right now is the exile when the Israelites are exiled into Babylon and then ultimately Assyria. Right? They have to reset their whole structures. Everything has to change. They don't have the big temple to go and have the monster gatherings anymore. That's where synagogue actually was born.
Yes.
And so it's always a pivot in an imagination. But at some point, it's like we have to break. And this is where I am. I feel like we have to break this idea that we're going back. We can't, if we just continually kind of hold on to hope that we're going to be able to go back to where we were. I don't think that that's a reality. Even the vaccine for this, we know that something else could surface that would be totally different 2 years from now. So I think that insurance companies, churches, businesses, the military, I think everybody learns from this and has some sort of plan, as I think they were trying to do before. I just think it's going to be highly motivated, and I think it'll change a lot of things.
Well, church has never been about what goes on inside a building.
That's right.
So if this crisis forces us to leave our pews and reach out to people in other manners, okay.
Yep.
If it means that we shrink our groups from mega church, middle-sized church, to the old synagogue size, which was 30 adults, 13 males could establish a synagogue. 10 males.
A minyan, yeah.
Okay. And still have meaningful worship and communication and so forth, that's okay too.
Yeah. I actually think that's what's going to happen is we'll have a whole lot more options. They'll just be smaller.
Yeah. It's humans have survived as long as we have because we adapt. We have a brain that helps us adapt faster than other animals. It also helps us screw things up faster.
We get out over our skis.
Yes. So, yes, will church be different? Will it be hybridized? Probably.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, the days when we were building Notre Dame style cathedrals.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
That's a long time ago.
Like they're in the what, about first fifth of trying to redo something that, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's a historical monument. It's a beautiful place to visit.
It is.
But that was started in the 12th century.
Yep.
And it took them 300 years and then some to get it done. So, but that was trying to emulate heaven on earth.
Mm-hmm.
A lofty goal, ultimately impossible to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
But will we wind up looking differently? Will we wind up feeling differently? Maybe not.
Maybe like many of these things, it'll awaken us. I do sometimes think that we had rested into the infrastructures that we had because we didn't know what else to do, and we didn't have the forced motivation to change at a level that would actually reach the world. I'm not saying at all that God would bring a pandemic to help this. I think that's just not good theology in my. Although I see, I can hear all my Bible friends. Well, I know, but there's no prophet that warned us, so I don't see it. But here's the thing with all that: it doesn't matter. God takes anything and brings the good out of it, and that's what I think we're going to see. It's just now we have this really great opportunity to really be creative. So that's what I would say: is if you're in groups or be creative when it comes to this
Yeah.
stuff. Find ways with this new world to begin to experiment. Fail. It's okay. Fail and try again. That's all we've got right now. And being able to rally and take care of each other is a big deal. One thing that we're talking about too, just in a more long-term deal, just to give our Noon Connect friends a little heads up. We're actually trying to learn which one of these kind of conversations are a good podcast. Might go a little bit longer, might go a little shorter on a day. Just to kind of extend ourselves and kind of experiment with all this as we kind of grow forward. We'll give you heads up as we change or shift if we decide to do that, but just love any feedback that you guys would have. And as we kind of move along, just appreciate you guys tuning in with us and making sure that we're all connected, even though we're separated. More to come on how we might be able to creatively be coming back together and gather. Although, as we've talked about before, we'll be doing that a little more cautiously maybe than other friends because of our average age and general prayer, and being able to do that because of the strength of our community. And so grateful for all that. Grateful for you. Any final comments for the troops?
Well, like you said, don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah, man.
It's better to be wrong than undecided, because at
Yes.
least you can correct yourself.
My dad used to say, you already have a no. Why not ask? Then they'll just either confirm it or. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I've always been sort of willing to ask and see what would happen. And I think that makes a big difference. Try, fail, try again. What we do know is that on the other side of this, we'll be stronger.
Right.
And that's what I'm looking forward to. And thanks again also for your time and constant wisdom. We really do appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. What's tomorrow's Noon Connect? Do you know?
I think it's music.
Cool. So we'll be checking in for that, and then we'll see you on Wednesday for Wellness Wednesday. I believe I have. Well, I'll let you know. So we'll have that. So we'll be in touch. So thanks everybody for everything. God bless you guys. Have a great week.